Shawn Mendes, In My Blood. It was a cool single. It was top 10 singles. It was his first single that he released. And it's got a cool beat to it, right? Yeah. It's cool. I like the chorus. It isn't in my blood, yeah. But if you think about it, if you listen to the lyrics a little bit more, you see that there's a hidden message to it. And the hidden message, in all truth, isn't really that hidden. The first words of the song begin with, "Help me." And I think that this is something that I was talking with one of my friends. She lives in LA, and she has the opportunity to meet, she lives in Hollywood in LA, and she has the opportunity to meet with lots of different celebrities. And she said that she remembers she met James Arthur once. You guys know James Arthur, yeah? You like his music? I love his music. He's an incredible artist. And she said that she met him, and he was one of the saddest people she's ever met in her life. Wow. She said that meeting him in person was quite pathetic, that he was nothing like his stage presence, is that he was an empty person. And if you think about it, this is quite a lot. You get a lot of these different celebrities and artists that they're not who they pretend to be. Is that if we go back to this song, why is it so popular? I think it's because it's so relatable. He says, "Help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. Laying on the bathroom floor, feeling nothing. I'm overwhelmed and insecure. Give me something I could take to ease my mind slowly. Just have a drink and you'll feel better. Just take her home and you'll feel better. Keep telling me it gets better. Does it ever? No medicine is strong enough. Sometimes I feel like giving up. No medicine is strong enough." This is his first single. This is what he wants to project to the world as he begins his career as an artist. He says, hey, I want to have a song that is open, is raw, is vulnerable, and people can relate to. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Avicii. These are 3 of 15 high-profile suicides that have happened in the last 6 months. Wow. Celebrities, businessmen, entrepreneurs, professional athletes that have committed suicide. And if you go through, there's a long list. And not since April. Not like in the last 10, 15 years. No, this is something that's going on. And it's actually not just for celebrities. Is that suicides are up 30% in the last 20 years. From 1999 until now, suicides have increased by 30%. And it's crazy when you think about these people, like what they have is that Anthony Bourdain, he was seen as someone who was like the pinnacle of his career as a chef. Is that you see videos of him on YouTube chilling out in Vietnam with Barack Obama, having Vietnamese pho. Is that he had a net worth of $16 million. Kate Spade, the fashion icon, her fashion empire was worth estimates of $150 to $200 million. And Avicii, we all know Avicii, right? I love his music. Is that he was worth $85 million at the age 28. His career began at 18, and for the next 10 years, he was probably one of the most popular and most successful DJs in the world. And he was worth $85 billion. That's such a huge number. It's so difficult for us to wrap our heads around it. We don't understand just how big that is. Is that if you spent $10,000 every day, it would take you 23 years before you ran out of money. That's how much money this guy had. And he was on a 3-month break. He was like, hey, I need to break, I need to rest, I need to recover, because he was having serious liver failures from all the alcohol that he drank. And it was on that 3-month break that he decided, you know what, there's no point. Just die at 28. Is that this affects the rich, the famous, the powerful, and just ordinary people too. Right now is that in the American military, and it's the same in the British military as well, is that more soldiers die from suicide than from enemy fighters. It's the leading cause of death among soldiers. In California, where I'm from right now, they have these crazy wildfires that happen every year. And it's very, very dangerous. It's like one of the most dangerous jobs you can have. But more firefighters die from suicide than they do dying on the job. In fact, suicide is the leading cause of death if you're a man aged between 35 and 45. More people die from suicide than anything else. Is that this is the world that we're living in? Is that this song is help me. Help me. This is a cry for help that you see across every demographic, across every aspect of society. People might be saying it out loud. They might be saying it through a song. They might not be saying it at all. But this is the message that people are saying. And this is the title of my lesson. The title today is Somebody Help Me. Because this is what people want. Everyone has got problems. Everyone has issues. And they try to fill these issues. They try to overcome these difficulties with fantasizing about, if only I had more money, then things would be better. If only I had a relationship. If only I had a better job. If only I had more education, that things would be better. But when we look at the top of society, when we look at the richest, most successful, most highly educated people, they show us that this isn't enough. And in fact, you find that suicide is found in the wealthy parts of the world. You don't hear about suicide in places like Africa or India or places where there's poverty. People don't commit suicide. They do this in the West, in the richest parts of the world. And why is that? I believe it's because people that are in poverty believe that money will make them happy. But people that are rich know that it won't. And see, this is the thing, is that we here in London, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that can feel the hopelessness in this city. Yeah. I'm not the only one that can feel the emptiness on the tube. That I can you walk through the people, they have blank expressions, zombies, surviving their lives, just trying to get through the day, just trying to get through the week. And what's the answer? People are saying, somebody help me. And they turn to all of these different things, but what can actually help them? What can actually get the job done? Well, I'm here to tell you, the only thing that's worked for me is Jesus. Jesus is the answer. He's the one that's actually able to help people. Turn your Bibles to the Gospel of Mark. And we're going to go to one of my favorite stories in the Gospel, because there's so many layers to it. And I've preached on it before this year, and I'll probably preach on it again before I'm done, because I love this story so much. And it's the story of the bleeding woman. So in chapter 5, in verse 21, it says, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Now, why were people waiting for Jesus? Because Jesus had a reputation. He was a miracle worker. He was a healer. He could drive out demons. Jesus could fix your problems. And this is why people gathered by the thousands to meet him. And they were there, they were waiting for him. And it says in verse 22, then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him. My little daughter is dying. Please come, put your hands on her so she would be healed and live. Is that we think that our lives are hard. We think that things are desperate. But I think that probably most of us have never literally fallen on our knees before someone and begged them to help us. That's a whole new level of brokenness. That's a whole new level of humiliation. That people are like falling on their knees. Please help me. You can help save my daughter's life. Is that this guy, he was so desperate. And we see, what is Jesus' response? Jesus went with him. See, this is the thing about Jesus that you see, is that wherever he went, he always wanted to help people. But the first thing before Jesus can help you, you need to want to be helped. See, what was special about Jairus is that he was a synagogue leader. This was a man of prominence, of influence. He was powerful. He was respected by the community. But he was so desperate that he was willing to come to Jesus to ask his help. I think the problem with some of us is the reason why we don't get the help that we need is that we're not desperate enough for it. Is that we're not ready to come to Jesus broken and to say, Jesus, help me. Is that some of us, through our pride, we need to go get beat up by the world a little bit more. We haven't experienced enough pain. We haven't been through enough suffering, enough hardship before we're finally ready to tap out and say, look, okay, I need some help. Can you help me? Because look at what Jesus does. He doesn't talk to him. He doesn't argue with him. He doesn't make it difficult at all. He just goes. It's like, Jesus, help me. So Jesus went with him. It's like, look at Jesus. This is what I love about Jesus' heart, is that he sees someone in need of help. He sees someone that wants help, is willing to be helped, and Jesus goes and help him. And you see that he's traveling, and we see as the story continues, it says, a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. So you have in the middle of the story, this interjection, Jesus is here, he's going to help someone, and on the way to help someone, everyone's crowding around, they're pressing against him. And there's this woman who's been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Now, I mean, we can imagine, especially the women here can imagine what a terrible inconvenience this would have been. This would have been very embarrassing. It would have been very shameful. Would have been very painful even, having this chronic illness, this chronic sickness. But we don't quite understand just what this would have meant for her in this society. Because according to Jewish law, this woman would have been constantly ceremonially unclean. So what that meant is that she could not worship in the temple. She could not go offer sacrifices. She could not connect with God. And she could not touch other people. If she would have touched another person, that would have made them ceremonially unclean. So just think about this. Imagine the next 12 years of your life, no one touched you. No hugs. No one shaking your hand. No one giving you a pat on the back. No one would touch you. You're the untouchable person. And not only that, is that this woman, she couldn't come into people's houses because anything that she would have touched would have become unclean. Any object she would have sat on, any cup she would have drank from, any plate she would have eaten from would have been unclean. So this woman, she would have been cut off and no one would have wanted anything to do with her for 12 years. And it says that she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Is that why was Jesus so appealing? Why was he so popular? Because 2,000 years ago, they didn't have medicine. There was no NHS. There were no doctors. There was no medicine. There was nothing to be able to help someone. If someone got sick, they either got better or they died. There was nothing you could do for them. If someone was born with a debilitating illness, if someone had something, there was nothing you could do. You just stuck that way. And what they had is that they had these doctors, but they weren't really doctors. Because the way that the Greeks, they believed that the best training for a doctor was battle. So what they would do is they would have the armies that they would come and they would fight, and then they would send the doctors afterwards for the wounded. And they didn't understand basic anatomy. They didn't understand how the body works. They didn't understand. Basically, they would see a person that was dying, and they would try their best to help them through trial and error. And best case scenario, they live, and worst case scenario, they die. And this is how doctors were trained. It was like, oh, okay, this guy's gonna die. Let me try to save his life. Like, can you imagine you just walk onto a war zone, you see someone, they're dying, and you just start trying stuff to heal them? That's what the doctors were. And this woman, she was so desperate. She's like, I'll go to the quack doctors that don't know what they're doing, that are just going to do trial and error. They're just going to their best guesses. Oh, try this. Take this medicine. Oh, let's do this surgery. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it didn't help her. She only got worse and worse. And I think for myself, the reason why I love this story so much is that I can really relate to this woman. Is that I can relate to her feeling of being socially cut off. And for me, it wasn't in a physical sense. It wasn't anything that was physically wrong with me, but it was in a spiritual sense. Is that for myself, is that I grew up in a very religious home. My parents were missionaries. My grandparents were missionaries. I grew up in the church my whole life. But I always kind of felt like a bit of an outsider. is that one of my challenges is that my mother's from America, my father's from Ireland, I grew up in Indonesia. So I'd go to America and I would be an outcast because I'd be Irish, I'd be foreign. I'd go to Ireland, I would be considered an outcast because I'd be, oh, you're so American, you have an American accent. I go to Indonesia, they don't know what I am over there. Is that no matter where I went, I was always seen as an outsider. And I went to a missionary school. It was a private school, and it was quite a small school. So it was only 18 people in our class. And when I was younger, I went to school. I went to a public school in Ireland. I was very small. I was thin, and so I was physically bullied. There's a lot of physical roughhouse, people shoving me into quarters and stuff like that. But that's much easier to take. You can get tough, and you just know how to deal with the bullies. But then as I grew up, towards the end of my thing, I started to get a lot more emotional bullying. And in this small group, there was this one girl. She was kind of like the ringleader. And what she managed to do is she cut off everyone from me, to where I wouldn't have a place to sit at lunch. I wouldn't have a place to sit when we'd have the weekly games. I wouldn't be invited to parties. And people just didn't want to be my friends. And I think probably the most painful thing is that towards the end of the year is that I had this one friend. His name was Sean. He was my best friend. And Sean, he loved medieval warfare, and we would make armor and swords together. We were best friends for my whole schooling career. And I remember at the end that for several months things were weird between me and him. He was kind of avoiding me, and it was tough. He was like my only friend. So I was just blinded to where things were at. And I remember we went on this school trip to another island, and everyone was assigned room assignments. And I went to Sean. I was like, "Hey, can I stay with you in your room?" He was like, "Oh, we're already full. We already have people for this room assignment." And so I got stuck with the room that was the last room available. Is that it was just whoever was left with me. And again, the guys in the room didn't really want to talk to me or anything like that. And I remember it was a few days in that into the trip that everyone was going out to dinner. And I told Sean, I was like, "Hey, can you wait for me? I just got to go run up. I got to go to the room real quick, and I'll be right back." And I left, and when I came back, he was gone. And it dawned on me. It's like, wow, even he doesn't want to be with me anymore. And I remember is that I didn't go to the physical doctors. I would go to these spiritual doctors. I would go to churches. I would go to Bible college. I would go to all of these different things, and I would be looking for answers. I'd be looking for help. I'd be looking for the solution to the emptiness in my heart. Is that for a long time I stopped going to church because Sunday was the worst day of the week for me. Is that there was this loneliness, this emptiness, this depression that settled in on me, and no one could help me. Is that I would go from church to church to church, and I would only get worse and worse and worse. And my heart became harder and harder and harder. I became more bitter, more jaded. But I still kept saying, there's got to be something out there. Is that this woman, what really blows me away about her is after 12 years of suffering, she's still looking for a cure. And I think that this was me, is that after all of these hardships, after all the pain, after all the suffering, I still believe there's got to be something out there. We continue in our story, is that it says in verse 27, when the woman heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. This is incredible, because this woman, she had obviously done her research. Because one of the things about the Messiah, there were many prophecies. There's like 400 plus prophecies about the coming Messiah. And one of the last ones in Malachi says that there would be healing in the Messiah's clothes. That he would be so powerful that if you just touched his clothes, you would be healed. And this woman, she believed it. She reached out, she touches his clothes, and she's healed immediately. I think that the problem with people today, the reason why they don't believe in Jesus is they don't believe he can heal them. Is that if people really believe that Jesus could make a difference in their life, they would believe in him. I remember I went this week to go collect my passport from a depot, and there was this English guy, and he's an older gentleman, and he was just really, really angry. It's like the end of the day and stuff like that, just anger. And I went to him, and I was like, man, I was convicted. I was like, man, I gotta share with this guy. Like, I gotta invite him to church. This guy needs God. And I go, hey, I would love to invite you to my church. You're very welcome to come. He's like, no, I'm a Buddhist. I was like, you're a Buddhist? What? What are you doing with Buddhism? But the thing is that he believes that Buddhism could help him. That's why he's a Buddhist. Is that if he really believed that Jesus could help him, he would be here right now. And I think that this is the problem, is that people don't believe in the power of Jesus. That's why they don't want to reach out and take hold of him.
Yeah, that's true.
What was amazing about this woman is that she had heard about Jesus. Jesus had a reputation. And I think that this is the thing, is that what do people hear about Jesus today? Is that there's so many of these mixed messages. There's so many false reports about who Jesus is. Is that who did she hear about Jesus from? People that had been healed by him. I think that it's very challenging for us, because a lot of us here today have been healed by Jesus, praise God, have been able to have their lives transformed. Jesus has really made a difference in our life. But have we gone about spreading the report about him to other people? Have people heard about the power of Jesus through our lives? See, this woman, she heard about Jesus, and that's why she traveled to meet him. That's why she was willing to press up against the crowd. That's why she was willing to reach out and take hold of him. And I think that it starts with us, because Jesus didn't go about spreading reports about himself. Jesus just did the work of God. Jesus just went around healing people. It was up to the people who had been healed to go around spreading reports about him. And I think this is about us, is that God is not going to come and write a message in the sky, Jesus is the truth. He could if he wanted to, but he's not going to. Is that God in his sovereignty has decided, hey, I'm going to help people, I'm going to heal them, and then they need to go spread the word. And I think this is a challenge for us, is that for those of us that really, hey, we believe in Jesus, we have the power of Jesus in our life, what are we doing to go tell other people about it? I think it's safe to say that this woman was probably a little skeptical, probably a little jaded, probably a little bitter, probably been hurt, exploited. But because of this report that she had heard about Jesus, it gave her the faith, it gave her the belief to be able to reach out and take hold of him. And this is the thing about belief, is that belief is not passive. Belief requires action. Is that she actually had the belief, she had the faith to reach out and take hold of Jesus's cloak. And I think that this is the thing for us, is that we need to, number one, be spreading the report about Jesus. And number two, we need to allow our beliefs in Jesus to produce an action in our life. So this woman, it says that she reaches out and she's immediately healed. That's the power of Jesus. But the story doesn't end there. Check this out. Verse 30. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" You see the people crowding against you. His disciple answered, and yet you can ask, "Who touched me?" You have to love the disciples. They're always good for a bit of comic relief. The crowd is pressing against him at all sides. You could picture the tube in rush hour. Everyone's cramming in there. They want to do it. And then can you imagine being in the central line? You've got people everywhere, and you're like, wait. Who touched me? But that's what Jesus says. Why? Because he knew that someone touched him with faith. There's a difference between touching Jesus and touching Jesus with faith. Why was this woman the only one that was healed? She was the only one with faith. And Jesus wanted to publicly recognize this woman. He wanted to point her out as someone who is special. It says in verse 32, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. He knew who did it. He knew who did it, but he's waiting. He's waiting. Hey, is her faith going to take her to that next level? It says, then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came forward, fell at his feet, trembling with fear. Why was she trembling with fear? Because what she had done was wrong. She wasn't allowed to touch people. She wasn't allowed to touch the people in the crowd. She definitely wasn't allowed to deliberately reach out and touch someone as important to Jesus, deliberately making him unclean. But her faith said, hey, even though I'm broken, even though I have these hardships, even though I have this problem, I believe that this person can help me. It says that trembling with fear and told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. See, she was already healed from her physical suffering. But that's not the suffering that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about her emotional suffering. He was talking about the spiritual suffering that she'd been going through for the last 12 years. Is that this is what Jesus wants. Jesus doesn't want to just fix your physical problems. He doesn't want to just fix your health. He doesn't want to just fix your money situation. Those things are important. But what Jesus really cares about are the deeper sufferings that you're going through. The deeper pains, the deeper hardships. And I love this story so much. And it's amazing because the story goes on and continues, and he ends up going to Jairus' house, and the people, even after he did such a great miracle, they still don't believe. And he goes and he heals the daughter. And this is one of so many miracles that Jesus does. But I love this one so much because I think that I definitely relate to the bleeding woman. I think that we can all relate to her in her pain, in her suffering. And Jesus is the answer. I think when we look at this story, it's when we look at the world, it's sobering. It's sobering when you see all of these suicides. It's sobering when you look at the depression rates that are skyrocketing, the mental health issues skyrocketing. Is that I don't believe that life is any harder now than it was before. I just believe that people are a lot more hopeless now than they were ever before. And these problems continue mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting. And when you look at 2,000 years ago, I don't think that people's problems were any different. People still had problems 2,000 years ago and now. And I don't believe that the solution is any different. I believe that the solution 2,000 years ago was Jesus. And the solution today is still Jesus. Jesus is the one that has the power. He's so powerful, you don't even have to touch him. Just touch his clothes, and that's good enough. Jesus wants to help you in your life. But the question is that, are you like Jairus? Or do you have the humility to beg Jesus for help? Is that Jairus didn't deserve Jesus' help. Jesus didn't owe him anything. But Jairus was so moved, so grateful. He was so impacted that he wanted Jesus to help him, and Jesus helps him. And then on his way to helping someone, he gets interrupted by someone else with problems. Is that in life, you're going to be interrupted by people with problems. There's no shortage of people with pain and hardships in the world. Right. But the amazing thing about Jesus, there's no shortage of his power. He has enough power to help as many people as need help. He has enough power. It doesn't matter how many interruptions there are. He can actually help them. And I think that there's two people in this room. They're the people that have experienced this power, the people that have been healed, the people whose lives have been changed, and then the people that have not, that are still in their suffering, that are still held prisoner, that are still trapped, cut off, isolated from the rest of the world. I have two challenges for you. For the people that have experienced the power, it's time to go out and to talk about it. Talk about the miracles. Talk about the healing. Talk about the things that God has done in your life. For me, 3 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was bitter and cynical and jaded. I wanted nothing to do with God. But I was in so much pain that I came to God broken on my knees. And it completely changed my life. My life has never been the same since then. And now it's amazing. I get to go and I get to tell everyone about it. I get to go on Imperial and tell people about it. I get to tell you guys about it. And it's awesome. It's my favorite thing to do. But is it your favorite thing to do? Do you really love telling people about the power of God? Do you really love sharing it with people? I got a challenge. Find one person, just one, that you want to go and share your life with. Someone that you can talk about Jesus with. Someone that you can share the power of God with. And someone that through the power of Jesus, you can heal. You can help this person. You can change and transform them. For the second group of people, the people that are still crying out, help me. It might be a silent cry. It might be hidden. It might be held back. It might be just a whisper, but you're crying out, help me. is that I'm just this bleeding woman, is that I still have the pain, I still have the problems. No one can help me. Is that it's time for you to come to Jesus broken, on your knees, ready to say, okay, here I am. I'm ready to get the healing. I'm ready to experience the power. And I want to challenge you. It's time to come and talk to me afterwards. Talk to my wife afterwards. Say, hey, I'm that bleeding woman. I've been trying to get help. I haven't been able to get the help that I need. Okay, great. Let's talk about Jesus. Let's talk about the power that he has to be able to transform your lives. Amen. Because here's the thing, is that the world is only getting darker and darker. But a light shines brightest in the darkness. Yeah. Is that the world, as it gets darker and darker, the power of Jesus is going to become more and more evident. As we hear miracles about people like Sade, is that there are hundreds, there are thousands of women just like Sade all over London, crying out, help me. And we are the ones that are able to help them. But men and women, young and old, rich and not rich, famous, not famous, they're the ones that we're being able to go out and help. And I love this story. It inspires me so much. And it makes me want to go out. It makes me want to see that, hey, let's not forget how bad the world is. I think that we can forget how rough it is, how dark it is, how painful it is. And it takes a sobering reminder of this song. This song, it hit me hard this week. As I listened, I was like, wow, like I forgot how bad the world is. Is that we need to remember what the world is truly like, and then we need to go out there and to preach the good news to a lost and dying world. Are you with me, church? Somebody help me. That somebody is Jesus. Yep. Is that either you've been helped and it's time to start helping other people, or you need help and it's time to come to Jesus broken. Whoever you are, today's the day to change your life. Today's the day to be like this bleeding woman, to be healed of your suffering. And so I just want to really challenge you guys to go after it, to challenge you guys to really to embrace, to believe in Jesus, and to believe that he can make a difference in your life. I love you guys. Have a great Sunday.